So welcome again, once again, everybody, to School Board to City Hall, which is our discussion with Chris Moise. To begin off with a land acknowledgement. So we are currently, as a presenter, I'm located in the city of Toronto, and Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. This is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share territory and protect the land. All subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, including Europeans, immigrants, newcomers, have all been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And these are values that we hope to uphold here at ProudPolitics, as well as in this webinar as well, treating each other with respect, creating friendships as we grow and discuss, and keeping a peaceful discussion as well, everything to be respectful. Just a bit about the agenda today. We're going to have a quick icebreaker, informative icebreaker, so that we all know that municipal elections are happening and they're just around the corner. I'm going to introduce our speaker, and we will be having a discussion on education, municipal politics, and at this point, anyone is welcome to join the discussion with us, either by raising your hand or using the chat. We're going to have an official Q&A period also near the end, and then just some concluding remarks. Just 2 points for housekeeping. I just ask that when somebody else is talking, just to keep your mic off so that we don't have any extra sounds coming in from the background somewhere, and just feel free to keep yourself on mute unless you're talking or raising your hand, which brings me to my next point is if you do happen to have questions at any point, feel free to use the chat and just add your question directly into the chat and we'll incorporate into the discussion. Or if you're comfortable, raise your hand and feel free to speak, unmute yourself, and we can talk and you join the discussion at any point. Join the discussion if you ever have a question about anything that's being talked about, or a question of your own, or a point like a personal anecdote you want to add, feel free. So just raise your hand and we'll include you right in. We also, just to begin, I do have some questions for the audience. So the questions are, what is advanced voting? If somebody knows and just wants to answer, and if not, this is a term that I feel like most people should know what it is, but some people might not be aware that advanced voting is a thing. The next questions will be, what are municipal, when are they taking place? And what are we voting for? Who do we vote for inside municipal elections? So does anybody want to answer for me, what is advanced voting? If anybody knows or just wants to share with the crowd. This is mainly for the audience because the candidate running surely knows. Okay, I see a raised hand. Emily, go ahead.
So advanced voting, it can be done in a couple different ways. You can mail in your ballot, which I believe the sign up is right at the end of August for mailing in your ballot. That's what I've done the past couple of years. And you can also go advanced, which means they open the polls in advance, usually a couple weeks before the official election date, where you can go at a time that suits you and you can vote then.
Thank you. And that is absolutely correct. Voting before election day actually happens. So my next question is, when is the municipal elections taking place? And I actually have a poll for this for you guys. So I'm just going to launch it. Feel free to take a couple seconds if you want to answer. When is the election happening? So the options are October 14th, October 24th, or September 24th. I see a lot of correct answers, which is awesome. So I'm just going to give you guys about 10 more seconds. As residents of municipalities, it's always our civic duty to go vote. So I encourage you all, if you do have time, to make a full day out of it. Find your local voting booth, show up to elections, and cast your ballot. Okay, so I am going to end the poll right now and see if I could share the results with all of you. So the vast majority, 83% got it correct. It is October 24th. Mark your calendars. That is when municipal elections are coming up, and it's not September 24th. That is a month later, but that is all right. Mark your calendars for October 24th. And then just for our next question, just give me 1 second. Okay, so you should have it on your screen right now. Who do we vote for? When we're running in different municipalities, whether it be Toronto or another township across Ontario, or municipal elections are happening all across Canada in different provinces, who do we vote for when we vote? I know when you think city politics, you think mayor. Okay, so definitely we're voting for mayor, but are there any other roles that we also vote for and cast our ballots for? So I'm just gonna give about 10 more seconds and see. Only correct answer so far. I'm loving this. Civic engagement. Okay, amazing. I'm just going to end the poll while we have 100% accuracy. Go team. So if you can see that, yeah, we are voting for mayor as well as city councilors who will be working in city council, as well as school board trustees. This includes Toronto Catholic District School Board, as well as the Toronto District School Board, as well as many other school boards across the country, depending on your municipality. So thank you so much for participating in our polls. So we know these are just answers for the audience. So as our participant Emily was mentioning, yes, it is not quite end of August, but beginning of September. The 1st of September is actually when applications for mail-in voting will begin. So you can order them online or by phone if you prefer mail-in voting. Also, I do recommend advanced voting days between October 7th, October 24th. If you go to the elections website, you'll be able to find all the information where you can go and cast your ballot. And October 24th is election day. The reason I recommend advanced voting is because then when election day comes, if something comes up and you're not able to do it, you don't have to stress because you have already voted. So if you are outside of Toronto, please do double check that your municipality is also having these same dates, but these should be accurate across all the municipal elections across Ontario. And as a final question asked, we are voting for mayor, city councilor, and school board trustee. But thank you everybody for participating, and I hope you might have learned something that maybe you didn't know before, or we're just happy to share the answers because you knew. Without further ado, I do want to introduce our speaker who's taking time out of their day today to join us. Thank you, Chris Moise, so much for being here. Chris Moise, for those of you who haven't heard yet, he is a school board trustee currently in the trustee for Ward 10. This is Toronto Centre, University-Rosedale area, and they're also running for Ward 13, which is Toronto Centre. And since they were elected in 2016, which is 6 years ago, they have led many initiatives, all that were designed to promote fairness and enhance equity for all the students that are in their jurisdiction. Chris has championed initiatives like Enhancing Equity Task Force, and he's also an active member of the TDSB Black Student Achievement Community Advisory Committee. They have been a vocal advocate for the elimination of streaming, which puts students onto different paths in high school that are predetermined. As well, he successfully removed school officers from at-risk schools in his ward. So Chris recently worked with city councilors in city council to invest millions of dollars towards the refurbishment of 2 schools, the Church Street Public School, as well as the Jesse Ketchum Public School, as well as the revitalization of Jesse Ketchum Park. For 14 years, Chris has owned and operated a small pet supply business. And before being elected to TDSB, Chris was also a counselor at St. Mike's Hospital. So based on this introduction, I know, Chris, you've had a myriad of experiences across the city. You've been a counselor, you've been a small business owner, you've now a school board trustee. What is it that makes you want to run for Toronto City Council to become a city councilor? I'm asking, what is your motivation? And yeah, what is it that made you want to run?
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, good morning, still morning actually. One piece that I'd like to add, though, to your introduction is that I'm also the 2S LGBTQ co-chair at the TDSB. So, and I have been for the last three and a half years. So, as mentioned, I've been a school board trustee for the last 6 years. And during that time, I was also I was the vice chair for 2 of those 6 years. And during that time, I brought a lot of significant changes to the school board. You mentioned the streaming from grade 9, 10, and which is important because, if you look at the stats of the school board, Black kids were streamed into applied, which means they couldn't get into university when the time came. So as a result of that, and the stats we actually got rid of the streaming, and now more Black kids going to academic streams. Some of the initiatives that I've brought forth at the school board also is around the SROs, as you mentioned. When the program was built or created 20 years ago, it was a trustee and the superintendent who decided where these officers were placed. And they were placed in marginalized communities where mainly Black kids were at. And of course, while they were there, Black kids were carded in the schools. They were harassed by the police, didn't feel safe. And as a result of that review, we actually ended uniformed officers in all our high schools across the system. And so again, representation matters, because as a Black person, as a gay person, with my lived experience, I bring a certain perspective to the table, and I bring the lens of equity to the table. And I feel that my voice actually has enhanced education across the system. Again, at the school board, we acknowledge that there's systemic racism within education. And by acknowledging these things, you could actually then start addressing it, which we have started to do at the Toronto School Board. And so with that lens and with that experience, I want to amplify that at the city level. Again, we live in the most diverse city in the world, but yet if you look at the council as it stands now, it's the least diverse council, I think, anywhere in the country. And as a result of that, there are voices that are missing at the table and not being addressed. And again, at the board table, I know the value of that. And I want to bring that perspective, that voice to City Hall. And I think we'll be a better city as a result of that. It's a Coles Note version of my response.
No, it's a great answer. And I think the reason a lot of people do want to run for politics is because they see that you can make a difference when you are an elected representative. You have responsibilities, you have jurisdiction over a lot of different policies. So now through all of your different lived experiences, you've seen success in some initiatives, and it's amazing that you want to take it all the way to the City Hall to be able to continue to make a positive difference. So thank you for that. But a more specific question is, you are running in Ward 13, which is Toronto Centre, encompasses downtown Toronto. It has a really large population, a lot of different schools as well, and a huge amount of diversity within Toronto Centre. My question is, what kind of differences do you want to make specifically to Toronto Centre? Are there any initiatives in particular in the back of your mind that with this role, this is the kind of change I want to create?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, you mentioned, I was a counselor at St. Mike's for 22 years, and my area of specialty was addictions and mental health, and those who were underhoused. And so my role was there to advocate for those who had difficulty advocating for themselves and getting them, into certain programs in the community, including housing. And so I'm living here for 22 years, as I have, I know the struggles that we've had here. And I know the pandemic has actually amplified people falling through the cracks in Toronto Centre. Toronto Centre is really a very, there are pockets of poverty here. We have St. Jamestown's, we have Regent Park, and, and even in my role as a school board trustee.
Go crazy, go stupid, go crazy. Go stupid. Go crazy. Yeah. Go stupid. Go crazy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So even as my role as, that's okay. Even as my role as a trustee, I've actually tried to bring more resources into the schools down here. And so I know that, so I know the importance of housing. And so one of the things I want to really champion at City Hall is actually bringing more housing into the ward and across the city. Even during this pandemic, we've seen a lot of encampments, we've seen a lot of addictions downtown. We cannot, there's been a lot of assaults on the street by people. And I think, if you look at this in a holistic way, housing is the key to the many of the challenges that we faced here in the city and in my ward in particular. And I think so once you address the housing issue, supporting housing, for example, you can actually give people the medications. They can have proper meals. They can have actually, proper sleep. And once you deal with that, I feel that the other ills of society, if you want to call it that, the addictions, the mental health, all those things and the crime will diminish. And so that's one of the things I want to champion when I do get to City Hall. I know that, with Anna Bailao and a few other councillors leaving, there will be a gap there as city council. And I feel that's an area that I could actually naturally fit in and use my my professional experience in that area.
No, thank you so much. You brought up a lot of really great points. Like, I do agree with you that by tackling an issue like housing, there's a lot of other issues that are also going to be helped and supported just by giving people access to affordable housing. Just a question for our audience, like how many people here, feel free to use like the reactions with a thumbs up. How many of us have like tried to see if we could purchase a home in Toronto or see what's affordable and just been so unsatisfied? Like this is completely out of budget, everything's going crazy. I see one thumbs up. But yeah, housing is such a huge issue, and in Toronto, a city like Toronto, another thumbs up. Wonderful. Well, sorry, not wonderful. But I'm glad that we all have this kind of sense of awareness, like that housing has become a really big obstacle for a lot of low-income families and even middle-class families. And that is definitely an obstacle that City Council to do a lot of initiatives on, and it's wonderful to see candidates running for city council that want to address this, because surviving and being able to have a home should not be something that is a privilege, it should be a right. So thank you, Chris, for bringing up that issue.
Also, just to add to that piece too, like it's not only just transitional housing, but low-income housing, co-op housing, and even perhaps even condos, in the sense that young people like yourself can actually get into the market. So, and again, we need to also have housing across the city, not just in Toronto Center. I know right now that if you look on line 1 of the subway, we have 80-story buildings from, Union Station all the way up to Finch. But if you look at line 2, for example, it's all low rise, 2-3-story buildings along line 2. And again, there's an inequity in the system when it comes to where housing is placed. And, if we're building subways and relief lines, we need to make sure that there's actually adequate housing along those lines, right? So that's also something that I want to look at when at City Hall.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. Just to bring the discussion back to sort of a bit about school board and education. So currently you are a school board trustee, and I know as a student who's gone through the entire Ontario school system, I've heard of the role on, do we have school board trustees? But can you enlighten for us a bit, what exactly is the role of a school board trustee, and how are you able to impact your school board as like holding the role of school board trustee? I know many of us in the audience might have been students or current students. So just tell us, talk to us, tell us a bit about the role and what kind of impact you've been able to achieve.
It's actually a very important role. It's as important as any other level of government. The TDSB is the largest school board in the country, 4th largest in North America. We have a $3.4 billion a year budget. We have about 600 schools, 40,000 employees. And my role as a trustee, of course, is to create policy. And so even though I'm elected, for my ward here in Toronto Center, when I sit at the board table, I represent the entire city, the school board. And so one of the things I did, for example, or help champion at the board, among many other champions things, but it's Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement as the first of its kind in North America, perhaps in the world, where, kids who experience anti-Black racism, can go, where Black educators, all educators can go and learn more about anti-Black racism. So that's something that we spent $29 million to create the center and also to staff it. And it's something that we're very proud of, and we will continue to champion. So those sort of things are important, and it will help students across the system, not only Black students, but all students. Yeah.
That's amazing. So I have a bit of a similar question too. So you talked just now a bit about what a school board trustee can do. If you were elected to municipal office or any city councillor, what can they do to impact education? For example, in a city like Toronto, they're two separate roles, but both have an impact. I understand a school board trustee directly focuses on education, but what kind of role would a city councillor also have?
Well, I've been fortunate to work with Councillor Wong Tam for the last 6 years, and there are overlaps that happen as a counselor and as a school board trustee. And as you mentioned, for example, like, there are two schools in my ward that I worked closely with Council One Time on at the time in regards to create community benefits. So we spent about $1 million in Trustee Public School, for example, for the field, for other community uses of that school. And as a result, the community have actually come into that space, especially during the pandemic, and enhance it. So which has been amazing. At Jesse Ketchum, for example, we had about $1 million in that school where we actually fixed the gym, and again, the field and other areas where the community can use it. And for me, for example, as a resident of Toronto, I use the schools on a regular basis. I played badminton for the last 20 years in the schools. So schools are public assets. And it's important that we open up the schools for everyone to use, not only during school hours, but definitely after school. So that's really important that, we keep that space public. It's because it is paid for by the taxpayer. For sure.
No, for sure. Thank you. Does anybody at this point have any questions relating to anything we talked about or want to jump in? Just want to open the floor. Okay, no worries. Well, thank you for talking about the Jesse Ketchum sort of project and how city councilors as well as school board trustees can sort of work together to make beautiful things happen in the community that benefit residents. Just to move the topic a little bit, focused on the municipal election that's coming up in October. Every election, there's always things that are happening, whether it is on social media or movements or things that are happening around the world that always seem to become like important policy issues at the forefront. So in this municipal election, are there any themes or any topics that you feel like a lot of candidates are discussing that is sort of at the forefront of the election that a lot of maybe even voters are hoping to have addressed during the election? Yeah. Which municipal issues do you believe are at the forefront coming this October?
Well, again, as Eva mentioned, housing is a big piece of that, right? And the relief line, of course. In my ward alone, there's 3 stops of the relief line coming through Toronto Centre. And it's important that, we learn from what happened at the Eglinton line and even the St. Clair line. A lot of small businesses went under. And it's important that, we actually learn the lessons learned from that. And we need to make sure that, we support small businesses along those routes. And also too, we need to hire people in local business, local people, especially students, when these things are being created. So those are some of the things I'm looking at that's important. And again, I've mentioned it, I hate to repeat myself, but again, crime is an issue, under-house is an issue. All those things are issues. So those are the things that, we hope to champion.
Thank you. One other thing I wanted to address, one sort of election factor, is that I know the pandemic began in March of 2020, and since then we've had 2.5 years of the pandemic. Many restrictions have been removed since then, so a lot less restrictions now than say a year ago. Are there any ways that the pandemic is affecting this election, if at all? Any sort of impact that the pandemic is having? Like, is mail-in ballot becoming maybe more popular, as an example, or do you find there's any other ways that the pandemic is still affecting the election coming this October?
The job of council and trustee has been really hard during the pandemic, especially back in pre-2018 when Doug Ford cut council from 47 to 25. You'll see there's a lot of turnover in council and at the board. There's still some wards that are still have only one incumbent candidate who's registered. And I know at the board itself, the TDSB, there's still one ward that has no candidates at all. So the job is a lot harder, right? And so, back in 2018, I was watching the news last night. We had about 521 people who actually registered across the system for office. And as of today, there's only 201 people who's registered. So again, the job has changed a great deal. And people are burnt out. and people not really wanting to participate. So that in itself is a concern. Thankfully, so again, the job has changed a lot. And in that, prior to 2018, people were able to councilors were able to go into the communities, talk to people. And I know that talking to some of my council friends, they haven't been able to do that. They're stuck behind a desk, meetings after meetings, and not engaging in an authentic way that they'd like to. So that's why there's a lot of turnover. But again, I mean, for me personally, though, I worked my butt off in the last 2 years during the pandemic, and there are lessons learned from that. We have to rely heavily on staff, work in partnership with them, and get things done. And I feel like I've that experience I have learned over the last 2+ years during the pandemic, and I'd like to amplify that, in regards to at the city when I get there.
So I did have a follow-up question about something you mentioned. You said that in some areas, like some wards, sometimes there's no candidate running, but a role has to be filled. Do you know what happens if there is no candidate running for a riding or for a ward, for example, as a school board trustee? What would happen to that role if nobody continues to run up until election day?
Well, if there's only one incumbent, one person on the register before Friday, I believe at 2 p.m., then if there's one person on the ballot, then they automatically become acclaimed, and they can resume their role as councillor or trustee. If there's no one on the ballot, that's a $1 million question. I'm hoping that the one position that still has no candidate, I'm hoping somebody will come forth because I wouldn't know. I don't think that's ever happened before, as in recent memory, but that would be interesting for sure. I mean, maybe that ward would not have a rep, perhaps.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So then would the other councillors in the area have to sort of pick up the slack and also contribute to that riding's responsibilities? Or is this like an unprecedented scenario?
I think it's unprecedented. I think, maybe there might be a by-election at some point, because the municipal act states that, if a seat is vacant, after I think 60 days, you have to have a by-election. So maybe there may be a by-election in that ward if no one actually puts a name for it. But again, we have till Friday, and I know the media has been doing a pretty good job in the last few days, letting people know that the date's coming up and letting us know which wards have no candidates. And I'm sure somebody put their name for it. I mean, I cannot imagine that in a city of 3 million, that no one's going to put their name for it.
Of course, no, for sure.
Yeah.
And I just had a question. So not so much a question, more of a comment, but in the chat, we have a participant who was commenting on our earlier discussion about sort of housing and zoning bylaws. And they brought up that they are a big fan of changing zoning bylaws to bring up 4 to 5 floor dwellings instead of just single family homes and skyscrapers. So I know that you are not a city councilor yet, but are you aware if in city councilors can make any kind of changes to these kinds of bylaws, like to encourage more 4 to 5 floor dwellings instead of just skyscrapers and single family homes?
Yes, I actually alluded to that earlier in regards to the line 2 situation. And there are rules in place now that, structures can only be 2 or 3 stories. And if you look at my platform, we actually talk about that. And I've speaking to the mayor, he actually supports that also, because again, there's an inequity when it comes to housing. Many communities, perhaps not in the downtown, don't want more than 4 or 5 stories buildings, which causes a problem, because everybody wants to come downtown and nobody wants to actually share, I'm going to say the responsibility of building housing out and building housing up. So I'm a supporter of that. It is possible. And I think, going in this new term, the mayor has actually stated that that's something he wants to actually address in an authentic way. And I'm in big support of that, for sure.
No,
Yep.
thank you. And that's good news to hear. Good to know that more city councilors are talking about these kinds of initiatives and these kinds of solutions as well. Yeah, thank you. Anybody have any other comments they want to put in the chat? Just want to leave the floor open, that if there's anything in the back of your mind that you want to ask Chris while we have him, feel free to put in the chat or raise your hand also. So just to move the discussion a little bit, I know representation in politics is like a really unpopular topic because our government should be representative of our population. We should not have, you know, an all white government or all anything government, because that is not how our population is. There needs to be representation. So with ProudPolitics, we do try as much as we can to support LGBTQ plus candidates and to sort of do what we can to make sure that they are highlighted as candidates and to make sure that policy platforms are discussed and that representation initiatives are gaining more popularity among the population as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you yourself are a Black, gay, queer candidate running. Your city council opponent, Ryan Lester, is also a queer candidate. So we know that in Toronto Centre, this upcoming election, we will have LGBTQ plus representation regardless, which is wonderful news. So my question is a bit personal. So as a 2S LGBTQ candidate running for municipal office, you have also run as a first school board office. Do you feel like there are any unresolved obstacles that need to be addressed specifically towards queer candidates running for elected office?
Sorry, unresolved
Any unresolved obstacles or yeah, like do you believe politics is inclusive towards 2S LGBTQ plus candidates? And if not, like what can there be done as an initiative or as an unresolved obstacle that can be tackled towards sort of making Canadian politics more inclusive at the municipal level or at the school board level to be able to make, you know, 2S LGBTQ plus candidates confident with running for office so we can reach representation?
You know, one of the obstacles of people running, people of color and 2S LGBTQ people, of course, is finances, right? It's expensive to actually run a campaign, right? You know, yes, you could put your name on the ballot, but, you know, it's expensive. I mean, for example, in Toronto Centre, you know, to run a full election, you need about $80,000 for that, right? And, you know, a big part too is of course it's fundraising, you know, and networking and knowing people. You know, thankfully for me, I've been a trustee for 6 years, so like I've had a chance to build a profile, you know, and meet people and prove myself over time. And as a result of that, you know, people, you know, come to me and wanting to support me, so which is great. And so the obstacle for me is not as great as others, but again, that wasn't the case initially. And I think this is why I'm really thankful for ProudPolitics, because again, you know, it amplifies, you know, the 2S LGBTQ agenda here, because without you, there isn't too many other spaces for us to actually talk about the issues that matter to us. Again, representation does matter. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you know, I'm the co-chair of the 2S LGBTQ committee at the board. And one of the first things that I did, for example, you know, was actually change the name of LGBTQ2S to 2S, because we wanted to make sure that, you know, the Indigenous people are always front and center in everything we do at the board. And one of the things we also did at the board too was that, you know, we actually brought in an Indigenous trustee into the fold, because we're able to do that. One of the things we'd like to do is actually bring an Indigenous trustee into the fold, but we brought a Indigenous student trustee into the fold, and by the name of Isaiah Shafkat. And also too, he identifies as two-spirited. And, you know, we have done so much as a board because of him. And again, it goes back to show how representation does matter, because when you bring certain people into run the table, they change the conversation, right? And for me, being a gay person and a Black person at the board, you know, I can speak to that with some authority, as Kristen has done at council as a queer woman. And again, this is why it is so important that we are at the table, not only at that table, but all tables where decisions are being made. But again, there's an inequity in the system around when it comes to LGBTQ people and also Black people. And I think the first part of all this is actually acknowledging the inequities. And once we acknowledge the inequities, then we can work towards resolving some of those things.
Absolutely. Really well said. And I do completely agree with your point that like when you do have more people at the table, you get to hear more perspectives, and then ultimately your solution and your policy will be more inclusive. It'll help more people. Having those diverse perspectives will make it a more sort of comprehensive policy, and it'll have more success. So absolutely. I did have a follow-up as well. You were mentioning about a bit of like an obstacle, like in terms of running, is definitely the money. So a lot of candidates do have to fundraise and a lot of out-of-pocket expenses as well. I know that at the provincial and the federal levels, when you're running for a party, like underneath a party label, you do get party support and the party can help you with fundraising. Also, you get assistance by running under the party label because some people might only vote a certain party. So then you benefit from that party loyalty as well. However, at the municipal level, there are no parties. Everything is sort of independent. And in this lack of party support, what has that, like, how have candidates resorted to funding? Does all of the funding for your campaign have to come through personal fundraising and personal out-of-pocket expenses because there is no party support?
Pretty much, yes. In previous campaigns, I've had to fund my campaigns quite significantly in the past. But luckily this time around, as I've mentioned, I haven't had to do that. And again, we know with inflation the way it's been, and people are on the brink, people do want to support financially, but I actually sometimes discourage them from doing that because I know them personally and some of the struggles they may have, and every dollar counts at this point in time. And for me in particular, one's time is more valuable, or as valuable as money, actually more valuable. So I encourage people to actually donate their time rather than their money. I'm in a position where I'm unfortunate that I don't need the money as much. I hate to say it out loud, but
no, it's good to acknowledge, points of privilege. Many campaigns that don't receive funding are simply not able to gain traction because they cannot allocate a lot of money towards marketing. So I think it's good to acknowledge that sort of privilege and not struggling as much as some other candidates, as an example. But sorry.
Yeah. No, it's a valid point. Again, it goes back again to working hard over the last 6 years and meeting people and advocating for others and using my privilege actually to help others, not only during elections but between elections also. That's really important to me. So again, it's these things are important.
So you were talking earlier about how time is in many ways more valuable than money. When somebody volunteers for a campaign and they donate their time, what kind of work could they expect to be like volunteering for?
Well, everybody brings a different skill set, right? Some people have, social media experience. Some people, want to drop literature off or take part in the phone bank. So there's spaces for everyone. For example, I have a couple button making machines, and sometimes people just want to come. Seniors want to come and just cut and and stamp the button. Kids like that sort of thing. So there's space for everyone. We turn no one away, quite frankly. So, and again, it takes a village, right? It sounds cliche saying this, but I don't run for myself. I run for my community. I have one of my weaknesses in life is that I'm terrible at advocating for myself. But when it comes to advocating for others, I'm all out, and I take no prisoners. So and I have a record to prove that at the board. And again, I want to bring that same energy and thought process to the role of counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I guess just to turn the subject a bit differently towards a bit youth. So as a school board trustee, you worked a whole bunch with students of all different ages. And sometimes we've seen, like with voter turnouts, it's always youth that are not as engaged. Like youth are the ones that do not show up to the voting booth as frequently as older generations. And then our vote is not represented because we don't go to vote. So my question to you is, are there any particular initiatives that you think could be successful, or maybe that you've even tried to make sort of an impact on youth, and even particularly to us LGBTQ plus youth, for them to be more engaged politically, to be more to have better viewpoints on political engagement, and to sort of rally up people to want to be excited for politics, be excited for elections, and yeah, so political engagement. So what kind of initiatives do you think would make a strong impact in increasing representation, but also getting students to be more politically engaged in politics?
You know, it's not one individual responsibility, but it's a collective responsibility. You know, for me personally, over the last 6 years, you know, one of the privileges of being a trustee is actually going to graduations. And I always go with intent to, even I oversee 34 schools downtown, but I do, and I cannot attend all graduations, but I do try to attend all the secondary school graduations because these kids are 17 turning 18. And, you know, in my speech, I talk about civic engagement and the importance of it. And even going into the schools during the school year, talking about these things. So that's really important. But I think, you know, as a city, as a country, as, you know, we need to go where the students, right, where the young people are at, right? We know that, you know, social media is what they use. Everybody has, you know, a phone close by. It boggles my mind that, you know, we could do banking online, but yet we're not able to vote online. And we know that if we actually provide these spaces for people, young people specifically, they will actually vote if it's easy for them to vote. Because decisions that are made at City Hall and elsewhere impacts them greatly, right? And so I think, you know, I'm being a bit facetious here, but I think, you know, those are in power perhaps don't want young people to vote, because it would change the dynamic of the structure of the system overall. I don't think young people actually know their power, because they have a lot of power. You know, when they come together, you know, they can change the system itself. But I've done my part and will continue to do my part. You know, and I hope others who get elected at council will join me to perhaps, you know, amplify the voices of young people.
No, absolutely well said. My favorite part about your answer was when you did say it's a collective responsibility. So it's all of us, like whether we have children, whether we are youth ourselves, talking to our friends and becoming, like talking about the election, doing discussions like this, making it more interactive, making it more of an interesting, like, let's go vote, let's do something cool for our, you know, for our country, and, you know, be able to make a say in like who is our representative, who is our government. Like we should all play a role in getting our friends excited and getting our children excited, and all of our friends and family, so that it is collectively engaging, and so people understand like it really is like a privilege to be able to make the time to go and vote. So it is a civic right that we should take advantage of. But thank you.
But also too, when we get when we are at City Hall, or if we're MPPs or MPs, whatever, I think it's important to continue to engage young people, right? It doesn't stop when you are elected. You know, for example, my MP here, Ms. Marcia Ian, you know, and part of her responsibility is youth. And, you know, I've spoken to her many occasions about that, you know, how do we engage youth? And I've mentioned again, too, you know, one of the things I've spoken to the mayor about as when I was vice chair of the board, and even at the provincial table, because at the school board, I've also sit on the provincial table, Ontario Public School Board Association. And, you know, there is a lot of poverty, you know, within young people, you know, and one of the things I've tried to champion, for example, is, you know, having free bus passes for young people to get to school, you know, to perhaps go to recreation facilities, you know, and all those all those things. It's important. And I even to life of me, I can understand why, we haven't done that yet. So again, as a city councilor, I'd like to perhaps engage with the city council and perhaps even, with our federal partners to try to, make that a reality.
Mhm. Absolutely agree. And I am somebody who would definitely benefit from like free kind of transit free passes for students. So absolutely, that is a terrific idea. There are many university towns across Ontario that are able to get like a transit pass for post-secondary students. And I know Toronto is a much larger city than these university towns, but it just means somebody's already done this policy elsewhere. There's already been pilot projects of a sort, you could say. They've already seen success with it. So I am hoping that Toronto is a city that will also like look into that policy for grade school, elementary, middle, high school, but also for post-secondary students, and hopefully work its way up to maybe even free transit for the community. We will see. But thank you, Chris, so much for all of your answers, for all of your time, for all of your insight and all of your feedback. I am going to open it up to Q&A with the audience. So if anybody has a question for Chris Moise, whether it be about the school board, what it's like to run for city council, or anything we discussed or haven't discussed, then please feel free to raise your hand. I see Samir already has his hand. Samir, go ahead.
Thank you, Christina, and hi, Chris. My name is Samir. You started talking about transit, and that frankly is where my heart lies. I served as the transit lead for the Toronto Youth Cabinet, and we essentially work with Toronto City Councilors on amplifying youth issues, and transit was the biggest one for me and my team. One of the things we did discuss was, of course, yes, bringing free bus passes to students in Toronto, especially given that it opens up access to local business. It pumps tourism and dollars into small businesses across areas of the city that folks otherwise wouldn't visit. But I actually cycled through your ward yesterday, and active transportation as well is something that folks don't really talk about. I know that we do have a candidate for mayor right now who is all about active transportation. But I think my question to you essentially is, outside of providing youth, and I should also say, if we are ever going to put transit passes in the hands of students, we shouldn't forget about university students. I went to York, very, very far away from the city, all the way in the corner. We just got the subway a few years ago. And even there, we have a large international student population who do not have the funds to, well, they have enough to pay rent and go to school, but they don't have enough money to explore the city and enjoy their lives. But my question to you essentially is, outside of providing transit options to youth in the form of passes, what issues do you see? What issues have you discovered during all of your time as a school board trustee in your ward and the city that otherwise go unnoticed? And how do you think we can solve them without having to ask the mayor to, I know he doesn't want to do this, increase property taxes, but how else are we going to resolve this issue?
I mean, that's a loaded question. There's a lot of issues at the board I've tried to champion over my term. For example, providing breakfast programs and lunch programs to everyone, because we've intention, we don't want to ask people if they want a meal or not, because then they're identified as being poor, and then the kids are then targeted. So we just provide meals for everyone. When I was in school, we used to provide bus tickets for everybody too, and at some point that stopped. So there, and even some of my schools here too, some in my ward, for example, too, there's a lot of kids who live in shelters. And I know that during the pandemic, when everybody went virtual, the kids in the shelters, were stuck inside all day, every day. And the only reprieve was actually going to school. And many of them reached out to me, crying for help. And I could go on and on and on. I mean, even in Toronto Centre too, we've had many shootings of young people. We've had violence in the schools. It's it's on and on and on. So there are things that the city and the school board can work on. The problem though with the city and the school board, everybody seems to work in silos, in that, well, the province should take care of education because, we're funded by the province, 99% of the time. And the city has its own challenges when it comes to funding, right? And you alluded to the mayor not wanting to increase taxes. I own a house, I'm a taxpayer, as most of us are, and I would gladly pay more taxes. It would help others, in our community. Even those who are underhoused and live on the streets are part of our community. As I mentioned earlier, I used to work at St. Mike's Hospital, and the people the patients that I used to work with, some of them were born in the hospital that actually they come in for help as adults. They've lived around the hospital. They've lived, in the margins all their lives, but they're very much part of the community. And when, I go into certain spaces and members of my community say to me or say to others, well, we need to do something about, getting rid of these people. That's not my term. It's others to use this terminology. I always say that, we are all part of the community. We need to wrap our arms around each other and make sure that, we all succeed and we all, get a leg up. And so this is why I mentioned earlier too, housing is a big part of that, right? Policing, which I have not even talked about yet, is another part of that. It's only this past year that the interim police chief, not even the permanent police chief, and the interim police chief actually acknowledged and softly acknowledged that there is discrimination within the police service in regards to their arrest procedures and stuff like that. So, and we've done that at the school board years ago. So once you, and again, even in healthcare, we know that there's discrimination in healthcare. So again, the starting point is acknowledging that there's inequities within the system. And once you acknowledge it, systemic racism within the system, then you can actually start to address some of these issues. So again, I think at the city council table, those are the things we have to sit down and analyze and look at perhaps different revenue tools. I know at one point we had the auto tax, was it auto registration tax that was removed. It's important to look at different revenue tools. I know at one point we also tried to tax the gardener and the DVP, and that was not allowed by the Wynne government. And again, that's something perhaps we need to revisit. And in addition to that, I think to raising taxes is something that I am in support of, because it will help a lot of people, quite frankly. And we also know that a lot of our infrastructure needs repair, right? Sewage, our roads, our bridges all need to be refurbished, and we cannot rely on the province and the federal government only to help us with our financial restraints, because we do have some tools that we can use. And that was a long-winded question. I apologize. Answer, sorry.
I mean, it was a pretty comprehensive answer, covered a lot of different points and a lot of different issues within the city, and a lot of different sort of obstacles within, So great answer. Thank you so much for that. If you also see, there is two other participants who also have questions. So I believe it was Richard and then Emily. Richard posted his question in the chat. So what would you say are the most important character traits for someone who wants to run to be a school board trustee or other municipal office?
Bring your authentic self to the table, right? And don't be shy about that. I mean, your lived experience is very important. I've always tried to bring my authentic self to the board table. And it's served me well, but more importantly, it served my community and served the school board well. And I mentioned some of the achievements that I've had, the successes I've had at the school board, so far. But another small example I'll give you is like, when I was vice chair of the board, I brought up a point at the senior table in that, every September, one of the things we do is we give kids the form to fill out, if they have asthma, they have a food allergy, all these things, right? They fill it out, the parents fill it out, and they send it back to school and split in their files. But one of the things we didn't have, for example, was sickle cell, right? Black sickle cells for black children. Some black children have sickle cell. It's a blood disorder. It's a painful experience for kids who go through it. It can cause death. But yet there's nothing on the form about sickle cell. Kids who may have sickle cell. And in the past, prior to that not being on the form, kids who were not feeling well in school, they put their head down on the table. Teacher would think, they were, they didn't sleep the night before, or, they're lazy, they're not paying attention, but they were actually ill. But no one bothered to ask, like, why is this child, not, engaged? And so again, it took someone like me, a person of color, who knew or know what sickle cell is, to actually have it put on the form so that, Black kids can actually say, look, I have sickle cell. And what should be done when this child is not feeling well, right? Either calling the parent or calling the doctor, or taking them to the hospital. And in some cases, it may even save lives. So again, I bring that as an example because, representation does matter, right? And being a queer person, on the school board, one of the things I did was actually, promote GSAs in all our schools. And during Pride,
GSAs?
Gay Street Alliances.
Oh, thank you.
And, and during Pride, making sure that every school, all 600 schools, receive a Pride flag, and they could hang it in their pole outside the school or in the school, and, have a presentation as to what it means, to the community, right? So again, these are small things, but, they're big things, right? So I give those two examples because, when you go into these spaces, be the school board of the city or elsewhere, bring your authentic self to the table and talk about things that, that you've experienced.
Thank you. So be authentic, run, and all of us know how to be authentic. We can all be ourselves if we really try. So I think what Chris was also maybe trying to say, that all of us could run for office if we wanted to, as long as we can bring our authenticity and use like the skill set that we have. I'm just inferring. I'm not trying to put it in your mouth. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we just have one more question. And thank you, Chris, so much for your answer. Emily, do you want to take it away? Ask your question.
Hi, yes, I'm familiar with your work. I'm actually a big fan. But I was just curious, your thoughts on the strong mayor proposal that Ford is putting forth for Toronto and Ottawa, because if you were a councillor, this would affect you. I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, a lot of people have asked me about that, to be honest. The mayor of Toronto, currently Mayor Tory, he does have the majority of support in council. So the things that are, and I have actually read the legislation. A lot of people hasn't. My team and I have sat down and actually read it. and Mayor Cherry has a majority of support in council. He does give input to the budget right now. And so that in itself would not change. Mayor Cherry himself is a small C conservative. So like, I don't think if he were to get reelected in 2022, that he may use these powers in any crazy ways. But that being said, though, I am more concerned beyond 2026. We don't know who's going to be the next mayor of Toronto, and we don't know what their thought process may be and how they may want to use those powers. For example, like, if Rob Ford was mayor, and he had these extra powers, I mean, like, that could cause some serious harm to the city, right? And so I think, it may be problematic in the long term. It may be abused by some individuals. So in the long term, I'm a little concerned about it. Also, too, I know in this new legislation, it talks about the mayor appointing heads of departments, including the city manager, and all committees. So again, I'm not sure if that's a positive or negative, because I know currently the city manager is the one who appoints people in certain departments, heads of departments, the bureaucrats. I think, I'm afraid that these appointments may become political in nature, and maybe they're not the best person that should be in the role. Again, I don't think Mayor Tory would do that, but I'm concerned for future mayors who may do that, and they may abuse those powers. So I am a little concerned about it, to be honest, but I haven't really formed a full opinion about it yet. Maybe in 2026, I may have a better idea how I feel about it. But as of now, though, like, I'm not too concerned, but I am concerned for the future.
Good answer. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions for Chris before we wrap up? Okay. So I'm just sharing 3 links in the chat. Just want to thank everybody so much for coming. It really means a lot. The links in the chat, so 2 of them are to our ProudPolitics website, in case you want to learn more about our organization and what we do. We also have a candidate list that has queer candidates from the last provincial election, the last federal election, and we're working on releasing our candidate list for the upcoming municipal elections as well. So if you want to check for your riding, see if there's a queer candidate running in your riding, and see if you want to support them. Also learn more about our organization with ProudPolitics, and the feedback form is the first link. So please, just if you have time, feel free to open the link right now. Just let us know what you thought of this webinar, and if you have any suggestions for future events, if you would come to a similar event. But most of all, thank you so much for coming. We want to hear your feedback, so just follow that link if you can. But also just to add that our next webinar will also be this week, so August 18th in the evening with Jason Veltri. Jason Veltri is also a queer candidate who is running in Thunder Bay. So if you want to hear from them, we're going to be talking about community organizations and how community organizations work with City Council to make magical things happen. But also follow us on social media as well. If you'd like to stay in touch with queer news and the election coming up, we're just at ProudPolitics, or obviously proudpolitics.org on our website as well. Thank you so much, everybody. And at any point, if you happen to hear of a queer candidate running for office and you don't see them represented on our website, please do let us know. We're always looking to update our database, always looking to grow our network and get in touch with more LGBTQ plus candidates. So thank you all so much. And thank you for all the positive feedback in the chat. At this point, I will stop recording, but thank you everybody so much for coming, and hope to see you again on Thursday and future webinars. Thank you.